So far, all I have said is that an 18th century device for securing mobility of knowledge has become, at the opening of the 21st century, global dogma, thanks to its re-exportation by the United States government, which now pursues its 18th century strategy by 19th century administrative means. In seeking to unify the practices of patent offices around the world, the United States government has essentially, from a legal historian's point of view, sought to force the entire world to operate in a 19th century administrative mold. What do I mean? 20th century regulatory behavior in the United States is almost uniformly constituted around a single procedural paradigm, which in 1946 the United States Congress enacted in its Administrative Procedure Act. Under the basic paradigm of regulatory behavior in the United States, and indeed in most other developed economies, government intervention in the economy is formally discouraged as a general principle. The free market is supposed to exist and to be functioning. When government intervenes in the economy, it is supposed to do so on the basis of what is both technically and vernacularly referred to as cost-benefit analysis. That is to say, the costs and benefits of government intervention in the economy are technically weighed, determined by expertise, that is, records are made, testimony is taken, the evidence is agreed to or at least argued over with respect to each asserted cost and each asserted benefit. Discount rates are carefully or at least adversarially discussed, and some net present value of regulation is arrived at. If that net present value is positive and the benefits are said to outweigh the costs, then rulemaking can proceed. If the costs are said to outweigh the benefits, the agency is inhibited from the intervention undertaken. This is the principle of rulemaking in all activities of the United States government connected with intervention in the economy on behalf of worker safety and health, on behalf of product safety, with respect to environmental law, with respect to regulation of the securities markets. In other words, with respect to pretty much everything that government does in order to coerce economic outcomes except the granting of patents. No cost-benefit analysis accompanies the grant of 20-year market monopolies to parties claiming innovations. No attempt is made even to assess the costs of regulation. The fundamental assumption underlying the patent office activity is an entirely counterfactual and fictional assumption that the value of any intervention is infinite, that no cost outweighs any innovation which can be showed to meet certain basic architectural characteristics. If a technological development is novel, that is to say not anticipated by a prior publication, and if it is non-obvious, that is to say not a mere incremental extension of what would be the understanding of a person reasonably skilled in the art, then it is entitled to a 20-year market monopoly without more showing. Whether such a monopoly is in the public interest or what factors might render it not in the public interest, it is outside the domain of the office's inquiry to make. The statutory structure says simply, consider whether there is benefit, and if there is benefit, issue a monopoly regardless of any inquiry into cost. This is unique treatment. There is no 20th century regulatory structure based around such an absolutely inequitable characterization of government activity as to be heedless of any form of social cost arising from government. Yet, the goal of the United States for the last 15 years, and in particularly for the last decade, has been to require, not merely to encourage, but to require governments around the world to fail to adapt anything like 20th century regulatory technology to the question of when a monopoly ought to issue for an invention, if monopolies ought ever to issue for inventions. Not only is inquiry barred into the question of whether a system of private taxation is better than a system of public reward, but no inquiry is to be undertaken into what the political or public or welfare cost of regulation through the issuance of patent monopolies might be. So this is groundwork. I'm sorry for saying obvious things. Everybody should, I'm sure, see it this way, but just consider how difficult it is to get across the obvious. The social benefit, in other words, of communication is not easily captured by the question of whether it is obvious or novel. Nothing I have said is new. Everything I have said is known to everybody, and yet there might be some social value in saying it. So, we've established what I would regard as the first point. We have at least considered why there is a patent system, and the answer is we don't know. This is a valuable fact. It should be kept firmly in mind, because software patenting is patenting. And if we don't know why we patent, then it will surely be clearly indicated why we don't know why we patent software. From the point of view of the development of United States patent law, there are few moments more devastating to any intellectual consistency or comprehensibility than the demise of the requirement for a working model. The fundamental requirement that a patent monopoly be accompanied by disclosures sufficient to reduce the patent's teaching to practice, that is, to make it possible not merely in theory to learn what the patent is about, but in practice for an ordinary workman in the trade to know what the patent is about, that requirement is the only essential requirement left in the highly unrestricted form of patenting that the 18th century saw as a system of skilled labor immigration encouragement. The one thing you must have in return for the benefits given out is an actual teaching for actual learning by real people who will compete in the trade. This is supposedly sufficiently recompensed to the inventor because he is an immigrant to an enormous country. His invention is only in the early industrial sense industrial. That is to say, he produces whatever he produces for a limited local market, and all of the other producers whom he enables are, from his point of view, non-competitors. A limited time monopoly, allowing the maturation of a domestic market, is therefore a fair exchange for the knowledge he reduces to practicable teaching, and this yields the working model requirement. For what is assumed to be at stake are mechanical inventions, ways of doing a thing with material in the world, removal of seeds and other detritus from the cotton ball, the production of a gun which can be fired from horseback using interchangeable parts, a machine for sewing a straight line through textiles without the intervention of a skilled worker plying the needle, and so forth. In all of these cases, the model itself contains the invention. The language accompanying the patent is inevitably to be illustrated by the thing, and the whole together constitutes a disclosure sufficient to allow a skilled tradesman to perform what we might call reverse engineering. The world of software bears no relation whatever to any of this, but software could not have been patentable had the Patent Office not decided in its sole discretion, for reasons largely connected with what it understood to be the flow of 20th century technology, to loosen the working model requirement. In my boyhood, I learned in the United States that the United States Patent Office, in its wisdom, had decided that it required only 2 inventions to be accompanied by working model requirements: perpetual motion machines and machines raising questions concerning the uniform application of the second rule of thermodynamics. And this was presented to me in my childhood as a sign of the enhanced wisdom of the United States Patent Office, that rather than continue to put warehouses full of physical objects into storage, It would regard the disclosures of technical diagrams, formulae, and other forms of intangible models as a sufficient basis to claim reduction to practice. Not, you understand, anyway intended as, or indeed presented as, a system of re-legislation of the patent law. This was regarded again as a mere administrative change, but its consequences were enormously far-reaching. The most patented inventor in the history of the United States is a collectivity which we know by the name Thomas Alva Edison. Not a person, but a group. Not an individual of genius, but the sweat equity of a team of skilled workers operating under despotic management. Nonetheless, the Edisonian inventions are inventions in the old patent law sense. Working models are produced, concept is proved, code is running, and communities form around the inventions for the purpose of furthering their utility, whether it's the phonograph, the moving picture, DC electric current for illumination and the powering of motors, and the like. The second most patented inventor in the history of the United States is an apparent organization, actually an individual, that is to say, a troll. The particular troll is now so famous and important as to be contained within the MIT campus through the names of buildings and the names of programs and scholarships. But in the interest of not rewarding trolls, I'll simply call him the troll. The troll was a major patenter of things that didn't exist and that he didn't know how to make. And he took advantage of the demise of the working model requirement. So, for example, in the late 1960s, the troll filed a patent application in the United States in which he said, it would be really neat to put a videotape recorder inside a camera. I have no idea how to do this, but if you could do it, it would be a very excellent thing. So I claim you have a video camera which contains a video recorder. I claim that the video recorder and the camera operate in the following fashion. You press a button and you point the camera at something and it makes a videotape of it, etc., 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 and the troll claims a bunch of things he can't do. And he claims them through a long process of continuation of one patent application after another, disclosing bit by bit little bits of more and more of what he can't do as the industry begins to get closer and closer to doing what he can't do. And when JVC finishes the work, and there is, in fact, in the world a video cassette recorder, the troll shows up and he says, pay me. And he gets paid. He does a lot of this. He has a lot of people who do a lot of this. And over time, he becomes the second most patented inventor in the history of the United States. But generally speaking, he is being paid for other people's inventions. That's not a problem because there isn't any working model requirement. There's nothing to reduce to practice. His disclosures are novel. They are non-obvious. They are indeed so non-obvious that nobody reasonably skilled in the trade can perform them at the time, including the troll, which does not matter since they are non-obvious novel disclosures and they look like they are reductions to practice because they claim a lot of things with a good deal of specificity and there are drawings. This is dangerous behavior. It should be a warning sign. But in fact, it isn't a warning sign because the troll is still claiming physical inventions. And so there is always the hope that sooner or later somebody will say, yeah, make us one. That, in theory, is all, after all, it would take to restore sanity to the system at this point. In the world of software, that won't do either. Because after a generation of that behavior, the behavior I have just referred to, the behavior that birthed the first of the trolls, we began to apply patent law, neither advertently nor inadvertently, but with what I suppose you might call half an eye on the cookie jar. We began to apply the patent law to entities which could not have, in the prior sense, been reduced to practice at all.